Welcome to Volume 11 RockTalk Podcast, brought to you by Volume 11 Music. Your hosts, Rich Hoffa, Rick Lawhorn, and Mark Dunn. RockTalk, Volume 11 Music.
Hey everyone, welcome to RockTalk here at Volume 11 Music in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm Rich.
Rick Lawhorn.
Mark.
All right, and this is episode 36. Gosh, you guys have put up with us.
We haven't been canceled yet.
No, we haven't been canceled, but you know, we like talking, so you know, we just decided, hey, we'll videotape this stuff, and hopefully somebody enjoys it.
Yeah.
And if you enjoy it, make sure that you please hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button, share it, tell all your friends, and
hello to our friend in Kazakhstan that watches.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes.
So this week's episode, we talked about a lot of things, but we're gonna talk about songs that gave us a trouble, something weird that we had to learn for a band or whatever, and
this topic was a submission.
Yeah, it was a submission
by Bobby Osborne.
Yeah,
Bobby, thanks, Bobby.
My personal trainer over at American Family Fitness.
Cool.
Yeah. So
And I like the suggestions of people. Seriously, if people want to suggest. That's great. I think it's a cool topic.
Please suggest stuff because it's fun. I mean, we just do this off the cuff.
Yeah, we don't even know what we're going to talk about sometimes.
We just decide before we get here. Who wants to kick it off?
Why don't you?
What, me?
All right. Yeah, let's do a different. Rich, you get to open up
I've never
tonight's
kicked
show
anything
here.
off.
You're the
So what's
drummer.
the hardest song?
The drummer runs the band. Kick it
Yeah,
off, dog.
or hardest song for you, like what was really challenging to learn it and to get it down. So
talking about back in the '80s, of course, and we played in various bands, and some of the drumming was difficult back then, and of course I was at a point in my drumming career too that learning different things, and we played a lot of straightforward stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't really go after, we started going after some fusion-y type of stuff and things like that, but I really wasn't playing anything that I had to really, count.
Right.
Count out with weird time signatures and stuff. So I had this band together, and they wanted to do a Motley Crue song off the first Motley Crue. Early, and some of the drumming on that.
So you still didn't want to count.
Well, but Tommy back then, I mean, he did some. He got real intricate, especially on the first album. Everything else got kind of
watered down,
the kind of same basic stuff. But I think it was, Too Fast for Love. Yeah, so it had, all this stuff would get going, and then you're stopping, and then you're doing this, and then you're doing this, and we were sitting there, and they said, "Well, we want to learn this," and I go, our singer, I go, "I don't think you can hit those high notes." He goes, "Oh yeah, I can hit them high notes."
There's some high ones on that.
I said, I don't think you can hit them high notes. Oh no, we think it. And I go, "Look, I can learn this song, but it's going to take me a little while to learn it because you got to count this stuff off. It's like your practice at different time signatures and stuff.
I'm going to go listen to this after this.
Yeah, right. Pull out your
so I'm sitting there and I go, okay, I'm going to learn the song. So the band learns the song. I learned the song. I spent the all week long perfecting it and getting all the little accents in there and all that stuff. Yeah. And we get to practice, and guess what? We can't hit the high notes.
Nope.
And I go, well, we're playing this song.
Plan B.
I don't care if you can hit them notes or not.
Oh, wow.
I spent all this time learning this song. You're going to learn it, but yeah, those are the kind of weird, and the ones that drag a little bit. Like I talk about Mississippi Queen all the time. It's kind of for me it's a different. It's just in that it's in a time.
That's a Bonham pocket.
It's just really a tough song.
Not
to
too fast, but not too slow.
Because you always feel like you're trying to speed the song up. So
you don't want to, because you'll throw the band under the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the song is up like Black Dog is. The drums are really what's reining it in.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like some songs, I'll sit, I'll listen to it, and you're going, man, it's got all this stuff going on, and I'll sit down and play it and not have a lick of trouble with it. You just go zipping right through it. I play, I always play to Tower of Power, Digging on James Brown.
Oh, yeah,
it's got
Tower
all kinds of funky stuff in it and all this hi-hat stuff, and I never had any problem with that song. It's just right through it, no problem. Boom. It's more straightforward, but it's got a lot of stuff involved in it.
Garibaldi ain't messing around.
Yeah. So that was one of the ones that believe it or not, Motley Crue.
No, and it makes sense. I get what you're saying. And sometimes it's kind of a deceptive thing because everybody people, well, they're not like Dream Theater or anything. So,
No.
But I mean, for us in that era, the Dream Theater thing hadn't even happened yet.
No.
The whole prog metal thing like that. So we're guys that grew up, you were talking about the early 80s, the stuff that was around back then, the stuff that we were all trying to cover in our bands.
Right.
The fact that there weren't YouTube videos that you could just look up anybody on how to play something, which is what happens now, which is great for all, But back then, no, you sat there with your record and you sat there and listened to that thing for 8 hours trying to figure out how whoever was, Neil of Rush or Eddie or whoever was doing some crazy lick that was a little out of the norm from what everybody else was doing.
And we did Winger with Rod Morgenstein, and that had a lot of. It was intricate drumming for Rod.
Yeah, Rod. Of course.
That's a great band.
Yeah,
that first record had all sorts of.
It was great.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff on that album.
Yeah,
that was definitely outside of the norm.
Yeah.
Straight ahead.
Well, it had upper level musicianship.
Rod Morgenstein, Red Beach, great guitar player, fantastic. Guitar player,
really good songs. Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll throw my hat into the arena next. So again, like I've said in some of the episodes, so I started playing, guitar. Late 1979, 1980, 81. And of course, everything's kind of hard early on, But when I started getting lessons, once I was presented with something, I was like, okay, I kind of see what that is. It's like a 12-bar blues, or that's a minor pentatonic scale.
Repetition.
Yeah, I get that. So that's why in an old episode, I talked about how the Rolling Stones were honestly a very big influence on me because the songs were cool and they were popular, but they weren't too hard to play. You could get into the groove, and most of them didn't even have that many solos, quite frankly. So that was a good starting point. Fast forward, late 1981, 1982, I'm playing with some of the different musicians that were in our little high school rock bands that we all had.
Yeah.
And the first one that kind of just stumped me, and I'd love to hear some of Mark's comments here on this in a minute, was we decided to take on the task of Tom Sawyer by Rush off of Moving Pictures. And so here's the issue. I'm not a bad guitar player, but there's a lot of stuff I don't know about. So number one...
You mean at that time?
At that time, yeah, in 1981. So we get to that middle part, and I'm going, this is just so weird. Like, I can't feel it. What is it? Well, I didn't understand the concept that not all rock music's always in 4/4 time.
Right.
So,
or you play over measures and it's still in 4/4.
Exactly, right. You're right. You play in odd spots. Very good point. So all of a sudden, I go on to find out later, oh, well, this thing, they're like in 7 in times. There's like a 7/4, 7/8 kind of thing. Yeah, and so...
I've played that a bunch of times, but I've never worried about it.
Okay, I didn't really realize it. All I knew was
trying to play it.
My brain in the fall of 1981 just couldn't fathom, because that album was only about, 4 or 5 months old at that time. And I loved it. I said, this is so... I wasn't even so much a huge Rush fan at the time, but I just was captivated by this album. And I did obviously become a Rush fan. So we're sitting there trying to figure these licks out. And the other thing was, it wasn't just minor pentatonic.
No.
You could almost say that's like a Lydian mode, the sharp 4.
He's so idiosyncratic.
Right, right.
And back to the rhythm thing, when I said I didn't really think about it, it's because I was just happy to have learned
to go, I
was going to try to break it down. If I was going to have displaced my downbeat on a 1, I would have been, what?
Yeah. So that just kind of stumped me because it was so out of the loop for a young kid that started out by playing Rolling Stones songs and then Leonard Skinner, kind of southerny rock. I didn't
Straight
know
into
that.
prog.
Yeah, and then going, I didn't even know it was called prog. It's just this band out of Canada, 3 guys called Rush, and they got this crazy little song called Tom Sawyer, and we're going to go ahead and try to take it on. So, and then the solo in the middle had some really
impossible.
Weird.
He hasn't even played it like that.
No. I mean, he doesn't. And so it's like, what is that? It's not that little blues pentatonic scale that I learned. It's just like almost abstract rock guitar playing, but in a cool way.
This is going to sound awful. I think he's accidentally great.
What a great description.
I think he's great.
No, I do too.
But I don't think that any of those solos, except for maybe Red Barchetta.
Red Barchetta, yeah.
But they're almost not copyable.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, right. And to sound like Eddie's tough.
But I mean, he's angular and weird.
Exactly.
So it's impossible.
So long story short, and we finally got it down for a high school band. I'm not saying we sound like Rush, but for a bunch of high school kids, we got it close enough, for what it was. And I learned a lot about music. I learned a lot about not all rock is in 4/4. There's this kind of progressive element where bands like to start to play like in 5 or 5/4 or 5/8 or 7/4 or 7/8. And then I started to discover, King Crimson, who at that time had an album called Discipline that was released around the same time. Crazy drum beats from Bill Bruford and Tony Levin and Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew, and of course Rush. So it really opened my mind to there's this whole world of progressive rock that exists within the sphere of rock music that's not necessarily Leonard Skinner or the Rolling Stones, who I also equally love. I love it all, but it was a different vibe, and so that one was a tough one for me to wrap my head.
Still is.
And what is he doing? What's that weird section? What's that weird solo?
Yeah.
I mean, you listen to Free Will too, the solo.
Free Will, right?
But I mean, the song's constructed though.
But
then you get to the solo and it's like, okay.
He took a left turn into the Twilight Zone there. I mean, it's like, man, it's cool. What is that?
And then you listen to YYZ. And that's amazing. Altered scale stuff.
That is a lot of interesting altered tones. So
that's interesting. How did your drummer do with it?
Well, and I'll give him a shout out, Dave Lum, still friends. I think he watches our show sometimes. Great
What's up,
drummer.
Dave?
Yeah, man, Dave. And Dave nailed it, man. He did his homework and he got his drum parts down pretty daggone close to Neil. And our bass player, Kenny Ames, one of Kenny Ames, and Kenny was a prodigy back then, and he was nailing those Geddy Lee bass lines. And I was probably the weak link, to be quite honest. I mean, I sort of got it, close enough, but I admit I had some troubles with the odd time signatures, that, like you said, Mark, those weird angular. I didn't have a whammy bar on my guitar. I was using a Gibson Les Paul, so I couldn't even do those. That's when Alex started using like some Strats and Charvels.
On that record, it's a humbucker and 2 single Strat.
And those weird little dips with the whammy bar.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think I was trying to sing, and I sang it down an octave low because,
You sang that?
Yeah. I don't have a high, I'm a baritone, but I was younger back then. It wasn't, luckily there's no bootleg recordings.
Oh, man, I was going to ask
that's probably I'm probably the most un-Geddy Lee sounding voice ever. Because I can match up to like ZZ Top and Johnny Van Zandt and, Skinner. I mean, I got that kind of a voice, and I do it pretty accurate, but Geddy Lee is about as far away from, my voice as you can get. My natural
anybody's voice.
Very unusual, but cool.
Unless you're from Canada.
Maybe it's a Canadian thing?
All the Canadians.
I don't know, man. My friend Rick Seymour in Atlanta, he's a guitar player for Wet Willie for a while.
Oh, Wet Willie, yeah.
And he said that he thought that Geddy Lee sounded like a witch.
A witch.
The first time he heard him, they were opening for somebody.
I think one of my friends once said a Daffy Duck on helium. I always thought that was one of the funniest. Like talking about, I think Geddy's vocals on the 2112 album, which are insanely, just like shrieking soprano
and control.
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy.
I don't know. I did a thing when Neil Peart passed away. We did a couple of tributes like this during COVID when everybody was recording.
Right.
There's a guy named John Coleman that I played with in a band called Deja that does a darn good job. On Red Barchetta. And we did the entire Moving Pictures album one time. But I just looked at him going, how are you singing that? And we were standard. We weren't tuned down to compensate.
And he was hitting
those
that's
things
great.
and some inflections.
Because I'll be the first to admit, I can't naturally hit none of that. I'm a baritone. I got a gravelly, ZZ Top voice. I just like this. We're just going to do it. We might not sound like we're going to do our thing with it. But, Geddy, man, what a
So did you nail the solo?
I did. I finally got to where, other than the whammy bar thing, I got it pretty daggone close. I mean, I spent all that time. I got the weird little 7/4 interlude, and other than I couldn't do the bar dips, but I could kind of keep up with what he was doing, and that was like all that stuff. And
not me. I never learned it
exactly. And I spent hours. But I guess the moral of the story with this show, I can attest. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And I was fall of 1981, listening to that Moving Pictures record and listening to Tom Sawyer.
And back then we didn't have YouTube.
There was no YouTube. There weren't even. That wasn't even in the guitar books yet. That wasn't even yet in like Guitar World or Guitar for the Practice Musician with the tabs. It was like you had to sit there with your Rush album on a rainy Saturday afternoon for 4 hours and listen to that song over and over and over to try to decode what in the world they were even doing.
And I don't think we've ever had a deep dive on Rush, but they're in my opinion, the kind of the purveyors of math rock, because they do different things in different portions of the song that are the same parts that were played earlier.
Right.
But one little thing
changes a little bit.
Like when you listen to Spear of the Radio, there's a form, but the form does this.
Right.
It totally flips.
Yeah, and I would say, a great comment, like when people talk about math rock, and there's a lot of it out nowadays. I know there's some crazy stuff out there. But I would say Rush, definitely. And then I'd also maybe throw in some of the King Crimson stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Fripp's really all about like weird mathematical things. And progressive rock.
Right.
And the drummers are playing oddball.
They didn't get the radio play, though. Neither Yes nor... I mean, Yes might have gotten close, but Rush really got radio play to be a true progressive rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I mean, you could argue that Moving Pictures, the whole first side, is a pop rock album, even though it's heavy.
And right, and if you look at their catalog, they kind of toned it down from albums like Hemispheres and A Farewell to Kings, which really were heavily influenced by great early 70s progressive rock. And so those were really complex albums. Not that Moving Pictures isn't, but they kind of steered a little bit over here to make it a little more, I think, radio accessible compared to some of the stuff from Hemispheres.
And Moving Pictures, from a production standpoint, was different than every other record.
Very different.
At Le Studio in Quebec, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. It was still Terry Brown producing all those albums.
But it sounded...
But it made it sound different. It sounded very different from like Hemispheres or Fly By Night or some of the earlier Rush albums that I think Terry Brown did all the early 7 or 8 albums there before they started switching there in the mid-'80s.
So now the rumors going around that Grohl's going to...
I've heard that.
I don't think so.
No.
I've heard Grohl. I've also heard Mike Mangini, who was with Dream Theater. Yeah, he's got the chops. I mean, he definitely can play. As far as chops physically, I mean, he could definitely do it.
I mean, there's a number of guys that could do it. Ray Luzier could do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that interesting.
Yeah, but I've been hearing a lot of the same rumors about a Rush reunion tour, which of course wouldn't be a total reunion without Neil, but something they can do to.
Well, somebody's got to go out there, and if they're going to do it, they got to play it right.
Yeah, they got to nail it.
Because they didn't leave room for
improvisation. No, you got to nail it.
So, Mark, what about you?
Yeah,
I'm going to speak for myself and Rick on this
one. Oh, yeah.
One of them is Eruption.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that could have been a choice.
But I didn't feel the competitive nature of it when I started learning it because it was so much fun. So I knew I didn't have it, but Rick and I were talking about this, and I had about 80% of it. I actually learned the tapping first,
right?
Because that was the easiest part.
The
3-note
taps, or the tap on the.
But the other, like just the crazy Clapton blues licks that are just at warp speed were kind of they were inaudible. And I was telling Rick, I used to buy my albums from the Navy Exchange in Little Creek Base when I could afford one. And they were inevitably the 3rd, 4th to 8th pressing, so they were always going to come home with skips.
Yeah.
Now, I had a crappy little turntable that was probably direct drive or whatever the crappiest of crappy could be. And so I learned that if you I would tape coins together and put them on the stylus, and that would help break through the skips. But at the same time, my turntable was so crappy, it moved it down slow enough to maybe move it down a minor third.
Yeah.
So once I realized that I just had to change my location to play the lick, I learned the form and then put it back up to speed, and it was close. So I don't think I got all 100% of Eruption until slowed down technology hit.
Yeah, I can vouch for the same thing.
There's like the 20% that's just so fast, and it's the mediums that we were used to listening to it on, albums and cassettes with hiss and things like that. Even when the CDs came out, it sounded clearer, but it didn't give me a whole lot more clarity,
right?
Because it was just so fast.
And I would love to lie to everybody and say, I was a child prodigy, and I was so brilliant that I was able to sit down with Eruption and easily figure out everything that Eddie Van Halen was doing. I would be lying like crazy. Yeah. I was a kid that grew up, like I've said in the last episode, on Leonard Skinner and the Rolling Stones, and I knew a pentatonic scale. And there's this guy named Eddie Van Halen doing magic tricks on the guitar. So like Mark said, I had some buddies of mine, and some of them, they weren't even really necessarily great players, but I know how Eddie does that tapping. He goes, dealer, 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 dealer. So I kind of understood that just by watching some friends do it. And like Mark said, some of those crazy, like insanely fast bluesy licks, and then that weird thing where he's stretching his fingers, and one note's like on the 14th fret, one's on the 17th, and one's on the 20th. It's a diminished minor third interval for those who like a little bit of theory there. And he's running it really fast. Now, again, me as a 14 and 15-year-old, I didn't know what any of that stuff was. And I hadn't really heard at that time like Alan Holdsworth or much of like John McLaughlin or Fusion Player, which I did get into later on. So Eddie's playing these outer space oddball licks. So fast. Point of reference, not like nowadays. Well, I'm going to go on YouTube and watch this YouTube teacher and learn it in 5 minutes. That was not the way it worked back in 1982,
you had to
81,
listen to
82.
the record, or sit there at the tape and pause and rewind.
Yeah,
and,
and I did a lot of that with, and I'm sure Mark did as well.
That's how we all had to learn stuff.
Right, and I didn't get it right away. I mean, it was like kind of like having a jigsaw puzzle with 10,000 pieces of a sailboat, and it took me forever, it seemed like, to learn that little fragment, and that little fragment, and that little fragment, and that little fragment, and then eventually starting to thread it together in hopes to even remotely sound somewhat close to the great Eddie Van Halen.
And harder than that, around the same time frame, years later, was Eugene's Trick Bag.
Oh yeah, that Vi thing.
I rented the video from Errol's Video.
Yeah, I remember that.
Put it into the VCR, fast forwarded the part, took my tape recorder with a Maxell or a Memorex, is it live or is it Memorex, shoved it up against the speaker on the TV and recorded that part.
Wow.
And that's when I started learning that piece of music. And I teach it today because I tell my students, and it's an advanced piece of music.
It's very difficult piece.
Look up Steve Vai, Eugene's Trick Bag from the movie Crossroads.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that is...
I watched that movie over the weekend.
It's cool.
We watched Crossroads. Of course, I've seen it.
Going down to the cross.
But, my wife Shannon, she never seen it, and so
Well, I tell my students that piece of music is CrossFit for guitar.
Yeah.
You're always You're always
it's insane.
If you stay playing your instrument, there are pieces of music that traditional classical, trained classical orchestra players, they play to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And to me, for rock guitar, that's
a chops buster, man.
Yeah, that's the one that really started educating me about the neck
and the arpeggio shapes,
and everything's kind of a chord shape. And so that's still, to me, when I was able to play that through, I felt like I had arrived. And it took years.
Yeah, that's a tough piece. It's based off of Paganini's Caprice. As the fifth Caprice in A minor. It's a violin Caprice. So you can look that up out there if you like. And so I've heard like Itzhak Perlman doing it on violin. It's amazing. And then, of course, Steve kind of took the concept of it and then sort of Steve Vied it, if you will. They did this amazing workout for everybody that's musical but phenomenal, going all over the place.
I was angry about it.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't hear Eddie playing something like this. And at that point, I mean, he was and Steve wasn't even famous yet.
No, he was still kind of on the rise.
I was like, who? I mean, like what? And I didn't even know what was going on. It was like one of those
Same
things.
here. I was just scratching my head going, and then when I got into that a little bit, and it would help me, and I don't claim to play the best version of it, but I've worked through it and on. It's an amazing piece. But I think it was Guitar World a few years later did an actual transcription, probably around late 1989, and I think it had Vi on the cover.
And it was Vi's transcription.
And it was Vi doing the transcription. So, but I'm like, I'm scratching my head going, what in the world is this, man? These arpeggios going everywhere and nonstop picking and string crossing, and it was unlike anything I had ever really seen.
CrossFit for rock guitar.
CrossFit for rock guitar players. It's a workout, man. Steve Vai and the Crossroads Suite, based on Paganini's.
So come on in, and me and Rick can show you how to play all this stuff.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I can show you where to put your fingers.
They have openings for lessons if you want to come
in. Fun place to take lessons, man. We have a great
take
time.
It from these guys. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Rock Talk. If you're enjoying the conversations that we're having, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to share it. Have a comment, and if you want to, chime in on some future episodes, put it in the comments, and we'll be glad to talk about any subject you want to talk about. Where are you playing at this weekend, guys?
Well, I'm doing a Saturday. This will be May 10th. Saturday, May 10th. I'm playing with the band Last Call. Great group of guys. We're playing down in Mineral at Everlay Winery. My first time there right here. It's beautiful. 5 to 8 p.m. And with Last Call, fun band. We do a little bit of everything. We do, classic rock, southern rock. But we also do like beach music, some Motown, soul music, a little bit of everything. Just a fun kind of variety kind of a band. Great time. So that's Last Call, Everlay Winery, May 10th, 5 o'clock.
I think I might come see it because I'm going to be off on May 10th.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would be tomorrow night is the 9th. I'll be at the Main Street Tavern again in Orange. It's my last of 4 weeks in a row.
Wow.
And evidently I have the rest of the weekend off, but the rest of my May is slammed.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
A lot going on.
And Rich, you're doing...
Well, I won't be doing any of that, but I will be. I do have a gig, but it's not a music gig.
It's not a music gig, though.
No, I'm going to be doing, I got to work on getting ready to do a dealer evaluation at a motorcycle dealership.
Wow.
Thanks for class.
This guy wears many hats, man.
Yeah.
The many hats of Rich Hoffa.
If you've watched the episodes, I still work in the power sports motorcycle industry. So I do consulting work in that business consulting. So I'll be working on with bringing on a new dealer that I take care of to show them how to be more profitable and do things differently than what they're doing now. So that's what I will be doing, and just preparing myself for a couple of days of spending it in a motorcycle dealership.
Cool.
Oh, where are you going to be?
Actually, here in Fredericksburg,
Virginia.
Yeah, I'll be working with a dealer here locally.
Okay.
And, of course, I work with dealers all up and down the eastern United States. But, so this one's close to the house, and that's going to be nice. So no flights.
Yeah.
No driving around in a
good thing.
Miniature rental car that is terrible to sit in, So.
Yeah, fun ride.
So that's pretty much it. So.
I guess I'll take my days off and work on the solo for Tom Sawyer.
There you go. That's it. So that's it. So yeah, again, if you're enjoying these videos, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to share it, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
This has been an episode of Volume 11 Rock Talk Podcast, brought to you by Volume 11 Music.